Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Neil Ward, Chair of the Planning Committee. Before we commence, I would like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber. When you have left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is to the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. By entering the council chamber, you accept that you'll be recorded and your image is retained and broadcast by the council on its website and YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please can you ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent now, please. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda paper thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any members of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. So item number 1, apologies for absence. I've received 2 for Dan Dawson and Craig Ward. Is there any more? Thank you. Item 2, exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest in an item of on today's agenda, please?
Yes, Chair. Just firstly, I'm the ward councillor for this application. Also, before I was on planning, I attended the applicant's house to look at preliminary plans in my capacity as a ward councillor, along with other representatives, but never gave an opinion whether I was for or against the proposal, as it was at the time. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, in relation to item number 1, going back a few years before I was on planning, I met with one of the applicant's agents and we discussed the plans, but that won't have any bearing on my thoughts or any outcomes or decisions I make today.
Agenda item number 4. I've asked for it to come to committee for clarity.
Thank you. Please make a declaration form and hand it to the governance officer following the meeting for those that have got that on there. Item number 4, minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 13th of January 2026. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Cheers, Bob. Anyone second? Cheers, Kiss. That's all agreed. Thank you. Right, item 5, schedule of applications. Application number 1 is 25/0028/FULM, erection of buildings and sports pitches to form a football training centre with elite professional and community facilities, including user accommodation and ancillary facilities with associated landscaping, access and parking at land north of Martin Grange Farm Lane, Bawtry, Doncaster, DN10 6DD. Dave Richards, the planning case officer, will introduce this item. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. Before turning to the presentation, just want to go through the pre-committee amendments. We have 3 contributions. We have speaking in opposition, Mrs. Colette King on behalf of the occupants of Martin Grange Cottage and Ravenglade. A presentation's been provided, which I'll put on the screen. Speaking in support, Mr. Rob Hume and Mr. Ross Jarvie will be sharing a 5-minute slot. And for the applicant, we've got Charles Dunn from Urbana Town Planning, supported by members of the project team from KSS and also the Derrington Group, should there be any technical questions. Since the publication of the report, there was one additional representation, which is commenting on traffic generation. These matters are addressed in the committee report and also in my presentation. Sport England and the Football Foundation have provided some additional comments. Their position remains, again, no objections in principle. and supports the proposals and subject to some technical clarifications. And this includes some detailed revisions in respect of the pitch dimensions, runoffs, line marking systems, technical specifications. And as you can see through some of the amended conditions, which I've highlighted in bold, I've just made some tweaks to the various conditions. And also there's a point on changing the internal layout of the professional training centre, and that's under condition 18, just to comply with some guidance in relation to safeguarding. So yeah, in summary, condition 18 is just updating the layout of a changing room. Condition 28 requires the lighting strategy to comply with Sport England's technical guidance. There's a new condition, number 39, that requires certification of the football pitches to a required standard, and then there's an additional informative as well. These amendments will ensure that Sport England's technical requirements are met. Members will recall we had a site visit undertaken on Friday. During the visit, we walked through the sort of central compound around the existing Martin Grange buildings. We appreciate the landscape and the layout of the northern section of the site. We visited the properties Martin Grange Cottage and Ravenglade, and I'm grateful to Mr. and Mrs. King to allow access. And there was an opportunity as well to view the access arrangements onto the A638. Turning to the proposals, the application seeks full planning permission for a purpose-built football training campus delivered across two principal building clusters, and I'll refer to them as the Elite Training Centre and the Professional Training Centre. The ETC is located in the northern part of the site. The ethos of this ETC is to operate as a self-contained high-performance environment. It's a year-round operation, includes accommodation for visiting elite teams, supported by hospitality, security, and maintenance staff. This essentially enables teams to live, train, and prepare on-site without requiring any external influence or facilities. And this is typical of an elite training campus to act as a home from home for elite teams when travelling or visiting the UK. The PTC, the Professional Training Centre, is forms the southern part of the site, and it accommodates the professional team operation, the Doncaster City FC Academy, coaching space, and ancillary facilities associated with the show pitch. It forms an operational hub for the covered indoor pitch, which I'll come on to. And the PTC is designed to be more of a flexible multi-use centre. Mentioned the show pitch. The PTC provides access and facilities for competitive fixtures at the show pitch and a 499-seater stand. Across the wider site, there's more ancillary things such as security entrance, maintenance compound, 5 full-size football pitches, dedicated goalkeeper training areas, warm-up areas, and paddle courts, together with the associated hard-standing, planting and other circulation space. The ETC is reserved for high-performance elite teams. The PTC will be available for community use, secured by a community use agreement. This commits the applicant to a structured programme that includes a minimum of 40 hours guaranteed access, a bookable access to the full-size 3G show pitch, access to indoor meeting spaces within the academy for education, health programmes, wider community events, an annual schools finals event programme, plus dedicated hours for school fixtures and training, free disability football provision delivered in partnership with Sheffield and Hallamshire FA, and walking provision as well. These will be enforced and overseen through a joint working group, which will include representatives from Council, Sheffield, Hallamshire FA, Active Fusion, and of course the operator. Also mention, a bit of a mouthful, but the Community Outreach and Inclusion Officer essentially is a full-time post to ensure that the facility is made available, that it's engaged with the community and monitored. They're responsible for ensuring it's booking slots, times, prices, and they would actively go into the community and bring people into the facility rather than wait for inquiries to come to them. Turning to the development plan, the MPPF, it's clear that the fundamental aim of the Green Belt is to prevent urban sprawl. It establishes a strong presumption against new development unless it falls within some of the, or one of the limited exceptions, or where it does not, very special circumstances, must be demonstrated. In this case, the proposal does not fall within any agreed exception and therefore constitutes inappropriate development to which substantial weight must be given, and VSCs are therefore required to justify approval, and those VSCs are set out from 7.3 in your committee report. In landscape terms, the site is visually contained and relatively unremarkable according to the assessments. It's assessed as having an ordinary to poor landscape value, making a modest and localised contribution to the green belt. The proposals will unavoidably result in a loss of openness and does amount to green belt, but in, harm to the green belt both in spatial and visual terms, and this forms part of the balancing exercise. Turning to amenity, there are 3 unassociated residential properties, and they're Martin Grange Cottage, Ravenglade and Martin Grange Bungalow. The application is supported by a suite of assessments, which I've listed here. Through the evolution of the scheme, the applicant has made some significant changes to the layout, mainly the central layout of the site, to respond to these concerns. The central areas have been redesigned, as you can see from these pictures. The top one was the original planning submission. The bottom one shows the revised arrangement presented today. The general theme is the separation distances between the PTC and the 2 neighbours there has been increased. The general maintenance area has been pushed to the western boundary, and the access has been completely redesigned to make a private road to the 2 dwellings, and then the main access now through the security area forms the access to the elite training facility and then the maintenance yard as well. I've just put an extract from policy 46 on that screen there because it's relevant to this next section. It talks about, along with the NPPF, setting a benchmark of no unacceptable impacts. The theme I want to present and what's laid out in the report is, yes, there will be change, there will be an impact, but the technical evidence will consistently show that this impact does not cross the threshold of unacceptable harm. Taking these in turn, this has been comprehensively assessed through a noise impact assessment in terms of noise. Noise monitoring has been carried out over a number of days in relation to the existing properties. For pitch activity, the assessment uses direct measured data from an existing operation, a 3G pitch during first team training use. So that's raised voices, whistles, ball on fence contacts and so on. And that equates to a 58 decibel level. The assessment then models a worst case scenario, so all 5 pitches operating simultaneously. We'll see just the left-hand picture there. The NSR rating shows at Martin Grange Cottage the level to be 50, 42 at Martin Grange Bungalow, and then 29 at Grange Avenue, which is on the outskirts of Bawtry. Critically, 50 decibels is Sport England's benchmark for acceptable external pitch noise. And obviously, based on those 3 measurements, the development meets or falls below that threshold. Concerns have been raised about traffic and parking noise. Again, the assessment adopts a worst case scenario where every parking space is in use and all the vehicles depart within a single hour. Or even under this scenario, this represents a negligible impact. Internal activity within the maintenance area has been tested at a conservative level of 74 decibels. The distance to the neighbours, indicates that there will be a low impact. And then finally, I could touch on this, but I've listed some of the conditions there that give full assurance that these conclusions are also underpinned by various noise specific conditions. In terms of car park lighting, the car parks use low-level, full cut-off luminaires positioned and angled to illuminate only the circulation in the parking areas, with no upward light and little projected spill towards the neighbouring boundaries. They operate only within the restricted hours of operation of the pitches and buildings, meaning the illumination is obviously time limited and it's automatically dimmed when not in active use and entirely switched off outside those permitted hours. Subject to the detailed lighting plan, the officers are satisfied that car park related lighting will not give rise to any unacceptable amenity impacts. And this shows a day one, just the diagram on the right there. Day one means without any mitigation, without any landscaping, and it shows the spread of the lighting to the car parks nearest the two neighbours there. In terms of daylighting, sunlight and overshadowing, the relationship between the PTC and the neighbouring dwellings has been tested through various shadow studies covering the equinox, summer and winter solstice across key times of day. The modelling demonstrates that, this is the equinox example, the proposed buildings cast little shadow over the garden or curtilage areas to Martin Grange Cottage or Ravenglade during the core BRE assessment hours. This is because of the distance between the PTC and the property boundaries. In summer, when shadows are shortest and obviously residents are more likely to be enjoying their gardens, the assessment shows there's little or no interaction between the building shadow and the neighbouring properties. So in planning terms, just to sum in terms of daylighting and overshadowing, there's no unacceptable loss of sunlight or overshadowing. Turning to visual amenity and perceptions of over-dominance, I'm going to focus on the PTC and specifically the indoor pitch, which is the bulkiest part of the PTC. That is set approximately 40.3 metres from the rear elevation of Martin Grange Cottage and 60.2 metres from the rear elevation of Ravenglade, with the remainder of the building obviously falling further away across the landscaped area. Members will note the blockwork boundary wall at the neighbour's property already screens some near-field views at ground floor level, and so the experienced view is of the upper portions of the indoor pitch as part of the skyline read over that wall. Another technical approach, and I've just shown it on here, is to apply the BRE 25-degree rule, which is a line drawn 2 metres from above ground at the neighbour's principal window towards the indoor pitch's roof line. As you can see, this shows that development remains below 25 degrees, which evidences little risk in terms of material loss of daylight. Just a point on the planting will obviously soften the upper storey part of the building over time and is secured by condition with a commitment to consult with the neighbours on final species and screening to make sure there's no unintended impacts such as winter shading. Just a comment on Martin Grange Bungalow at the head of the site. So obviously traffic and noise effects to this property have been examined in detail. Day-to-day movements associated with the academy and training are relatively modest. Across a typical weekday, it's anticipated around 40 to 50 car arrivals and departures, and these are spread throughout the day, linked to staggered training times rather than any sort of continuous rush or continuous flow. Community use follows similar patterns with small waves of parents and players arriving at different times rather than one large influx. On the occasions where the show pitch is in use, the transport assessment details a deliberately extreme worst-case scenario, assuming that 200 cars all arrive in a single hour. Even under that scenario, the upgraded access junction continues to operate within capacity, meaning that traffic should not and would not stack back towards the bungalow or create sustained disturbance. So returning to the same slide, and stepping back from the individual assessments, it's important to look at the cumulative impact. The consistent red thread running through each of these assessments is that while each neighbour will experience change, none of the impacts amount to an unacceptable impact in planning terms. The amendments made to the application and the safeguards provided through conditions would reinforce this. Just turning to some of the other considerations, these matters, highway matters have been addressed through the transport assessment. Again, they adopt a baseline and then a worst case scenario, assuming that all pitches are in use simultaneously and the show pitch is operating at its maximum capacity. For the ETC, it's more bespoke. The teams will arrive in sort of organised, pre-booked basis, usually through coaches, 3 or 4 coaches. PTC will, as I mentioned, operate a similar pattern during weekdays, team operations, primarily coach-based with limited private car movements. Obviously, there'll be activity from the community bookings and the occasional use of the show pitch, which is why the transport assessment has gone with a peak-on-peak scenario of academy sessions overlapping with a full-time show pitch event. The transport assessment also incorporates committed developments, such as the Hurst Lane permissions that were granted by committee in November in outline form. The modelling confirms even under the worst case conditions, the junction to the A638 continues to operate within capacity with queuing remaining short and well managed. The transport assessment does a full impact of local transport patterns, accidents, hotspots. The TA sets out there's 2 accidents within 500 metres of the vicinity of the site entrance. None of these, when they were investigated, are linked to the operation of this junction. In terms of active travel measures, it's important to recognise the context of the application. This is not a sort of typical town centre sports hub. Elite players, as I mentioned, will arrive almost exclusively by coach or organised groups along with the academy players. For these reasons, the site does not naturally lend itself to a higher proportion of walking and cycling trips. However, the applicant has proposed a proportionate package of improvements, so this includes a potential for a pedestrian crossing on the A638, a new footway on the western side of the A638, and the upgraded bus stops, which you can see in the picture here, to replace the sort of minimal provision with modern shelters, raised curbs, tactile paving, and real-time passenger information, funded through the Section 106 contribution. And then briefly on the access, again, the Martin Grange Farm Lane is an adopted highway. The length of it could be widened to 6 metres, and a ghost right turn is proposed into the site to allow traffic to enter safely. This will be subject to the usual stage 1-2 road safety audits to ensure that the final layout performs safely under real-world conditions. Turning to design and character, the scheme has been through a long and iterative design process informed by 3 rounds of pre-application engagement, design review panel, and continuous officer dialogue. There are some areas remaining, a disagreement remaining between the applicant and design officer. First is in relation to the overall form and layout of the campus. Design officer considers that a stronger reference to the existing properties would have been preferable. The applicant's position, which I endorse, is that the site lacks a coherence of architectural character or cue to follow, and the specialist nature of the facility leads to what is proposed to be a purpose-built, landscape-led campus in the landscape in terms of an identity as being the right choice. This leads to a consistent palette of materials across the site. A second area is the amount of detail, but I consider that the various matters can be picked up through the comprehensive set of conditions. The ground maintenance building is more prominent to the western boundary. However, I believe that's necessary as part of reducing the impacts to the neighbour. And finally, members will acknowledge the prominence of the PTC in the southern part of the site. It will be in an elevated position in the landscape. It will be visible until that landscaping begins to take hold. In terms of ecology, the scheme introduces over 450 new trees, species-rich grassland and habitat, and both SUDS features to improve both drainage and habitat aspects. The site isn't subject to any statutory ecological designations, and the baseline surveys confirm the presence of typical grassland, hedgerows, common species rather than any irreplaceable or sensitive habitats. The ecology officer raises no objections subject to conditions, and we should include the licensing for a district level licence for great crested newts if required. And in accordance with the Environment Act, the scheme will deliver a minimum or mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain. The applicant has voluntarily indicated an ambition to exceed that, but while that uplift is welcomed, it cannot be given weight in the planning balance. Overall, subject to the common recommended conditions and obligations, the ecological strategy is policy compliant. Just quickly turning through drainage, this site lies within flood zone 1. From the starting point, the design team followed a SUDS hierarchy. Infiltration testing was undertaken, but found to be not suitable, and the resultant approach is a restricted pump connection to the public surface water sewer with full treatment, storage and attenuation on site. Both the drainage team and Severn Trent Water have confirmed they're comfortable with this in principle, subject to the usual agreements, adoption processes and technical approvals. In terms of other considerations, won't go into too much detail. These are essentially listed here and subject to conditions that are considered acceptable. There's no other technical constraints to delivering the scheme. In terms of planning obligations, the most substantial is that community use agreement, which guarantees a long-term and enforceable programme of community access, along with the other package of measures, including the sustainable transport contribution I've already mentioned, a local employment and skills plan, which would secure apprenticeships, training, work placements and partnerships with Doncaster College and Sheffield Hallam University. And I mentioned the biodiversity net gain monitoring amount contribution as well as required to ensure that it meets the 10% requirement. Finally, turning to the overall planning balance, the application requires you to apply whether very special circumstances exist which outweigh the harm to the greenbelt, along with any other factors. This is a balancing exercise, and the question is not of whether there's harm, but whether there's collective benefits which are so compelling that they clearly overcome it. In terms of the greenbelt harms, we've established them already, and in terms of the residential amenity, their views will fundamentally change, but ultimately every technical assessment concludes that these are not unacceptable. Finally, there are localised landscape and visual harm, particularly in the early years, and these carry moderate to limited negative weight. And set against these harms are a series of major, compelling, and I would say nationally significant benefits. This includes the scheme will deliver a national level elite professional training campus. And this directly aligns with Sport England and FA's strategic priorities and brings a standard provision rarely achieved at local authority level. The project will deliver construction employment, supply chain investment, 40 operational jobs. Inward investment from construction alone is estimated at some 40 to 50 million pounds. The community benefits I've outlined already, and these are significant in favour of the scheme. The applicant has also gone through a site selection process which demonstrates there's no alternative non-greenbelt sites which can accommodate the operational, the safeguarding and the land take required for a campus such as this. And then finally, positive weight has been given to the design quality and the environmental and biodiversity benefits of this scheme, given that the council has declared a biodiversity and climate change emergency. These carry a moderate positive weight. So when these benefits are viewed cumulatively, their combined weight is very substantial. The greenbelt harm remains a starting point, but isn't the end. In your case here, this is a strategic investment into Doncaster, which is designed to be long-term and secured by legally binding obligations. Officers' advice is that these circumstances do clearly outweigh the harm to the greenbelt and all other identified harms, and development is therefore acceptable. Accordingly, the recommendation for you here is to grant planning permission subject to the matters here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dave. Right, we've received a request to speak from Mrs. Colette King, who's a resident at Martin Grange Cottage. And that's on behalf of Mr. Adrian King and Mrs. Marilyn King in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you're ready to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've finished. Your 5 minutes starts now. I'll give you a warning with a minute to go. Thank you.
We've sent a presentation through, so I'll start with the presentations.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Thank you.
Stop the time. Would you like to start now then?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for the record, we have tried to engage the applicant's solicitor regarding a house purchase. However, both our solicitor and the local MP's office have been ignored numerous times, hence here we are. For over 3 years, we have been subjected to significant antisocial behaviours, including threats, intimidation and harassment, severe enough to involve the police. Coincidentally, most occurred within 1 or 2 days of us raising objections, so we are currently being supported through this nightmare. We have little confidence in the management plans implementing the conditions, as we had to engage enforcement just to ensure compliance for the academy itself. The significant areas of issue are noted on screen. Next slide, please. Under planning law, Windows on the front elevation must not cause unreasonable overlooking. The PTC is on the highest part of site, so currently enables footballers in residence to look directly into our properties, including bathrooms and our daughters' bedrooms. The construction phase will also cause a significant loss of privacy with its proximity to us, as well as the general intrusion from users of the facility being able to look into properties due to site topography. We cannot wait for 15 years for trees, so we gain back our privacy. Next slide, please. Allegedly, the building does not exceed shading from existing trees. The statement is ironic as the building was missing completely from these shadow plans. This structure will result in substantial interference with our right to light. We would recommend a digital modelling to demonstrate the effects on our properties, which will prevent a Waldron analysis or radiance test after development, prior to us pursuing an injunction, as the existing shadow plots significantly downplay the reduction in light we will experience. To be in complete shade for over a quarter of the year when we have full light now will result in substantial harmful overshadowing and an unduly dominant impact. Next slide, please. A 10 decibel sound difference is classified as a significant adverse impact, yet the noise report ignores the 17 decibel increase calculated for just the show pictures alone. This is without factoring in 499 spectators. There are significant omissions and inconsistencies within this technical report, which could be the reason for the disclaimer relating to whether the findings could be appropriate for use. They fail to reference cumulative noise. The bottom right image now shows the dark shaded areas where cumulative noise will occur due to noise spill. This is just one section. But perhaps more alarming than that are the areas completely omitted from the report, which is shown on the next slide, please. There will be continual noise on site, football up to 10 p.m. at night, weekends and bank holidays. But there will also be nighttime activities for things such as guest movements in accommodation, pitch maintenance and deliveries. The areas with stars on are currently all missing, as well as any construction noise. The bottom right-hand table is from Leicester City FC's application. Park Hill House there was around 150 metres away from any structure, with construction noise predicted at 59 decibels. So clearly for us, at round about 30 metres away, construction noise would be severe. The report's conclusion has been relied upon to help recommend this approval. This in itself is tantamount to obtaining planning for a hardcore rave warehouse while using noise data for a silent disco. Next slide, please. Cumulative lighting also has not been mapped across the site. You can see on the top left floodlights towering over our bungalows in blue. These can trigger migraines, which is of significant concern, as we can see the academy lights over half a mile away. But when not in use, currently there is negligible light spill across the site, so this will unreasonably interfere with the use of our homes and health. Next slide, please. Can you imagine these in your back garden will be completely enclosed, overpowered and overshadowed by this? We strongly refute a robust search for alternative sites have been undertaken. Next slide, please. To conclude, when balancing up, was the moderate negative weight given to us based on inaccurate technical reports received, or was it because we're only a couple of properties so are deemed insignificant, merely little people who are inconsequential versus a glamorous elite football venture offering 40 hours of community access? The application proposes to encapsulate the little people in an intrusive, overbearing commercial leisure and hotel facility. This is hardly moderate, and we look forward to discussing our objections with the Secretary of State.
You overran by 1 second.
It's not bad for a lecture.
Thank you. I will now ask the committee members if they wish to ask the Mrs. King any questions in relation to her submission. Bob.
Thank you. Can you just go over your overlooking fees again, please?
Yep. So the overlooking currently, the issues we've got are that is the highest part of site. It is a significantly large building. The footballers in residence will have direct access visually into our properties, so you can physically see. If you are, obviously you came round to the gardens, that the house itself is slightly higher. So in our bedrooms, bathrooms and living areas, you can actually see the farmers in the field, you can see the pigs in the field. The height of that field is such that it enables people to physically look in as it stands at ground level at the moment. That is an issue we've got with people walking round, but also with the building itself, along the elevation where the accommodation is, the bedrooms are situated where the windows are looking directly at us, and you will be able to see into our properties.
Any more questions? Rob?
Mrs. King, I'd actually like to thank you for providing a really good and well-rounded residents' contribution. Thank you. I've noted down a few things you mentioned there. There's probably aspects of what you said that will get picked up by officers later on, so I won't come to much of the noise aspects. In regards to the overlooking that Bob mentioned as well, do you know how many of the hotel rooms will be overlooking your property?
So I don't know exactly how many, but looking at, if we could get the plan up, if we could go.
It's all of the PTC. So
Let's have a look. So looking at that, yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Approximately 6 will most definitely have direct access to us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Probably another 6 directly access to Ravenglade as well. So it's significant. The accommodation can hold up to 60 people. That will be, obviously, to make it a viable venture, they want it as busy as possible. That is not going to be insignificant. You can't tell people not to look out the window. Natural curiosity is such that you are going to look at whatever's in front of you. We are directly in front of those windows.
Another one from me. One of the key tests for this application is because it's on the Greenbelt land, and the wording is whether there's very special circumstances in order to grant planning permission. This is something I'll ask the applicants about as well. Do you think this site provides those very special circumstances to grant it?
Not with us in the middle, categorically no. I personally do not think the benefit of this site outweighs what we will be subjected to with us physically living in the middle. Absolutely not. And I am astounded that anyone can come to any other conclusion than that. The technical reports are flawed. They have inconsistencies. They have significant omissions. And for something of this nature, of this magnitude, to leave us in the middle of it, it beggars belief. And I have no idea why anyone in their right mind would want to go ahead with a multi-million-pound scheme with private residents, bungalows, elderly people in the middle of it. Who does that? And why does anyone think that's a good idea?
Majid?
Although not a planning consideration, you did mention harassment and some other bits and pieces. Can you just elaborate on that for me, please?
So we have, since 2022, we've known about this scheme. Since 2023, when we have raised objections, incidents have occurred within 24 to 48 hours of us raising objections. They have ranged from threatening behaviour, direct threats to us, intimidation and harassment as well. 9 of which were reported to South Yorkshire Police. We have a log of them, and we are liaising with them. They are helping to support us through this nightmare.
Just on that, what Rob's just asked, what was the police's response?
So the police did come out on pretty much every occasion. Well, every occasion that we asked them to come out to, they did. It was deemed significant enough for them to come out. There was a couple of instances where they asked if we wanted to press charges. However, given the state of where we are with the sort of police at the moment, they did say that it would likely be a caution, and the stress of us pressing charges wouldn't be outweighed by basically letting it go. We have said we've logged it. We are currently waiting for the police to come back with looking at the instance overall as a holistic thing. So they are supporting us in relation to this. If you look at the individual items in isolation, they're not overly bad, in the sense of if it's just a one-off, you let it go. But the more it happens and the more you tie it in with it occurs after we've raised an objection of some form, then there is a pattern starting. And for us, it's the intimidation side of things. We are literally like sitting ducks on this site. You can see today there are 3 of us. The application side, there's a lot more people here to support the application. I get it. It is a glamorous site. It's football. It would be fantastic for Doncaster, and we don't dispute that. We don't dispute the benefits this would bring to Doncaster. We're not against the idea of it. What we're against is the fact that it is being proposed around us with the applicant wanting to keep us in the middle, seemingly. It does not make sense. I know it's not a material planning concern, but there are restrictive covenants. There's a lot of legal issues outside of what we've mentioned today to prevent this scheme going ahead. So the fact that all of this has been ignored beggars belief with us in the middle of it. It just does not make any sense to us whatsoever.
Bob, can I?
So just on the flip side of that, have you had any positive or constructive conversations with the applicant?
No.
Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Definitely not a planning consideration. It's more my own interest and how this could be unpicked after this meeting. If the developer proposed to buy all 3 of the properties, would that be a potential solution?
It would remove the objections, clearly. So in that respect, it would be a solution because it would remove the objections. We had reached out to the applicant on 4 separate occasions. The last time after the application went in, we thought we were getting somewhere, but as I said in my opening statement, our solicitor has tried numerous times to engage the applicant's solicitor. Even the local MP's office has tried to engage, and all of us have been ignored. So for us, we bearing in mind this has been going on since 2022, our lives have genuinely been on hold for 4 years. Our house is in a state of flux because we need to refurbish it. We haven't started doing that for 4 years because we've been waiting to see what is happening with this application. So the fact that nothing has come of that is quite frustrating for us. So we are trying to move on with our lives as opposed to literally being in limbo, waiting to find out what's happened. I have no confidence that it's something that the applicant wants to do because they've had 4 years to do it and it just hasn't happened. So whilst, yes, that seems a logical idea, the logical solution, but it hasn't happened. So I'm at a loss as to where we go from here because, as I said, I'm amazed that it has got to this point where it's being recommended for approval, given the issues we've encountered and given the discrepancies in the technical reports and the omissions in there, yet it's still being approved. And they've been relied upon to say that it will have a moderate negative impact on us. I just do not understand how anyone could come to that conclusion.
Anyone else got to add? No. Thank you for that, Mrs. King. We've received a request to speak from Mr. Robbie Hume, who's a resident, Mr. Ross Jarvie, who's the chairman of Bowtry Retail Association, in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes collectively. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you have concluded your submission. Just bear in mind, if you are going to be sharing mic, you've got 5 minutes between you. We've had it before where one's been expected to really... Yeah. Okay, then. I'll give you another 2.5 and again in a minute, okay? If you'd like to commence, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, and thank you for letting me address the committee. My name is Ross Jarvie. I'm the chair of the Bawtry Retail Association, better known as Visit Bawtry. We fully support the application for the Football Academy at Martin Grange and for its development, which will support the businesses in Bawtry. And without such things such as this, the small market town cannot support the current diversity of offering. The ongoing development of Bawtry Golf Club and the reopening of the airport and the adding of the existing assets of the racecourse, Yorkshire Wildlife Park, just to mention a few, will put Bawtry very much on the map. We are a member of the regional LVEP group, and its purpose is to promote the regional area as a destination, and Doncaster is much needed for tourism, which obviously with the airport reopening is a big factor. As I say, I'm sure the project will prove to be important both locally, regionally and ultimately nationally. Unfortunately, as we're significantly lacking in facilities such as this locally, there are many small clubs that are struggling financially and are unable to provide all-round year training facilities. The fact that there's no public investment and yet there are significant benefits to the public cannot be underestimated. Bawtry has a long history of raising money for charity, including for breast cancer, to which we hope to use the facility to put on further activities. We also identify that this will support the jobs on site, and again, the more people that work locally, the more that will use the facilities, shopping and lunch, and maybe even the occasional socialising. We also are hopeful that the development will prove to be important to improve the public transport, which I know the local MP is trying to make as a priority, and the Yorkshire Y, the Big Y parking ride may also be more used. Yorkshire, I see, as part of the northern region, it has an ambition to host the Olympics, and it will be facilities such as this which will enable that to happen. Bawtry, we're very proud that Bawtry is a centre of health and well-being, and many of the companies locally provide facilities that would benefit from having an elite academy such as this locally. We are, as a town, hoping to enter the Town of Culture Award, which is newly launched for 2028. And whilst this development won't form part of it, we hope that maybe, if we're unsuccessful this time, it will form part of future applications. We hope the members choose to grant the planning application as presented to you, and we look forward to working with the operators in the future to maximise the benefit to retailers and future visitors to the area.
Hi, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk today. My name is Robbie Hume. I'm here as a father and also as a coach for a girls' junior football team under 7s and a coach for a boys' football team under 9s as well, but also as an adult as well. I'm going to run through a few issues that we encounter as a coach and someone who plays football. There is a lack of pitches, especially in this sort of area of Doncaster, especially when we're talking about floodlit pitches or 4G pitches. There's a lack of availability on any of these said pitches as well. Of those available, the facilities are truly terrible. Grassroots with either no netting, goalposts with either no netting, not attached or with huge holes in it. The pitches are of a disgrace in one word or another. Which sports facilities, the sports facilities seemingly not feeling it necessary to do the works in part of it. Sorry, I can't get my words out, pardon me. There's a lack of availability for disabled or disadvantaged people as well to enjoy the beautiful game. Nothing seemingly accessible for a group of mates who just want to have a kickabout on a Thursday night. This is important for me as a person who's gone through mental health problems. Being able to see your friends, relax, take it out, take the stresses out on a football pitch. Bawtry needs something that we will all be proud of, and I challenge anyone to see a project like this and say it doesn't improve the area and give the community something to say that they are proud of, and not to mention the jobs it will create. The fact that there are plans to help facilitate girls' teams, disability groups, walking football, including local school children, that will also have legally binding times each week, is a truly fantastic proposition and one we should not even contemplate rejecting. For me, this is a future and we should be excited and we should feel privileged that Bawtry is being offered a fantastic opportunity.
That's your time, thank you. Thank you for that. Has any of the committee got any questions to ask? Go on, Chris.
Yeah, you know, you're talking about the commercial benefits to Bawtry. As I see it, this development is pretty much self-contained. I don't think there'll be any commercial benefits to Bawtry. So, if you'd like to expand on
Yeah,
that.
no, absolutely. No, I mean, that I can see what you mean, but that's the same as though there'd be no commercial benefits for things like Mount Pleasant to Bawtry, where people go for a wedding. That's a self-contained event. They'll have the wedding, the reception, the food, all on the site. But it's been proven that things like the farmers market gets busier when there's events on at the wildlife park. The racecourse, I mean, St Ledger is a prime example. The St Ledger has a completely self-contained facility. You can go there from the morning all the way to the early evening, and yet Bawtry benefits from events such as that. So we're not going to sort of start expecting footballers coming for breakfast every morning, but certainly the sheer number of people who perhaps will experience Bawtry for the first time will help with the outside. So certainly none of the hotels are worried about this being in competition, because these are people who perhaps wouldn't naturally have come to Bawtry prior to this.
Yeah, well, I can't see professional footballers coming to train visiting the local hostelries, shall we say. I don't think that's very conducive to training for a professional footballer. And, you know, you're comparing it with Doncaster Racecourse. Well, look at the thousands that visit Doncaster Racecourse. And I think the stand only holds a couple of hundred people. You're not comparing like for like.
No, I wasn't trying to compare them, but I mean, I don't know if you visited St George's Park in Derbyshire, where the England elite sports facilities are. But that's something that people who go to there again, you don't go and watch matches, but the local Bakewell and the other sort of some of the local villages around there have all seen an increase in footfall of visitors who perhaps go and see their stars training, with schools who come and visit from regionally. You know, we still have people coming from Selby who'd never been to Bawtry and didn't even know Bawtry existed. That'll soon hopefully stop that being the case.
Yeah, well, thank you for your answers.
Anyone else? Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Jarvie, it might be helpful to know that this committee, granted a few months ago, rejected an application when Goffs tried to expand their horse sale site, primarily on the basis of economic benefits to Doncaster. So, personally speaking, as a member of this committee, that argument's not going to wash too well with me when it impacts residents in that area. On the related point about economic spend in Bawtry, do you foresee the professional sports people staying here going to Bawtry on an evening?
Probably not the elite ones. I think the elite ones have again, if you've ever visited St George's Park, they actually have weighing scales in the bedrooms, which I don't recommend trying personally. But they have, I don't imagine the elite sports but people will be, but certainly when children are coming to play and having facilities, their parents and the extended groups of people and maybe the coaches, and also I dare say there's a bit of downtime. We've got Doncaster Knights, for instance, after their last match of the season, they're coming to Bawtry because they're going to have a week off, hopefully, before their next match. So I dare say there will be some benefit, but we're certainly not. That's not staking our lives on it, and that isn't the primary reason for support.
And just for clarity, do you know whereabouts on the compound those the children and their families would be staying? Is it the ETC or the professional one?
I don't, but I think it's the P. I think it's the non-elite element of it. But there'll be more day visitors. I don't think there's much plan for large amounts of children to stay overnight. So I think it's more the daytime that when they're doing the training.
But where I'm coming at it from is the resident said there's potentially 6 or more hotel rooms directly overlooking their bedrooms, including their children's bedrooms, at which point they could have adults going into Bawtry on an evening, coming back, being quite drunk and causing antisocial behaviour in the area, which is it would be a concern for a resident there. But I mean, if it brings economic benefits to Bawtry, hey-ho.
Majid?
Chair, apologies again, maybe not a planning consideration, but I'm just keen to hear your opinion. We've referenced earlier on some harassment and antisocial behaviour and police involvement. Now, if that was to spill into Bawtry itself, into the shopping areas, into the village itself, and how do you think that would affect businesses locally and the residents who live there?
We're very fortunate. We have very good police engagement with Pub Watch and the like. So the levels of antisocial behaviour in Bawtry are already very, very low. And we also have schemes where all the door staff are connected. But as I say, I'm not anticipating that this any different to a large amount of people coming to the Bawtry Golf Club. Could be coming into Bawtry. Bawtry can cope with that type of levels of people. And certainly we've got no concerns on that front. And certainly the local police officers haven't raised anything with Bawtry, or not specific to this application, but in regards to antisocial behaviour being on the increase in Bawtry.
Anyone else got any questions? Right then, we'll move on to the next one then. So we've got received a request to speak from Mr. Charles Dunn, Urbana Town Planning, on behalf of the applicant in support of the application. This is your opportunity to speak to the committee. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission. If you'd like to speak, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. It goes without saying that this is a significant proposal, so I want to start by thanking officers for their thorough report to committee. As is only right, the application has been assessed rigorously across Greenbelt policy, amenity impacts, highways, ecology, design, and so on. The officer's report's the culmination of an extensive and robust planning process, and the recommendation to grant permission reflects that scrutiny and the careful exercise of planning balance that policy rightly requires. You'll know that the proposals for a nationally significant football training campus providing both professional and community facilities. It's not a speculative application. It's been very carefully cultivated over several years to become, as officers conclude, a genuinely unique opportunity for Bawtry and for Doncaster to deliver something that will bring with it massive benefits for the whole community for years to come. Time doesn't allow me to talk through every technical aspect today, but as you've heard, the project team alongside your officers have done that work in detail, and all relevant consultees are satisfied and comfortable that permission can be granted, subject to a strong set of conditions on a Section 106 agreement. That being the case, I want to focus on the key themes that I know will be informing your decision today. First and foremost is the relationship, as you've heard at length, with the neighbouring dwellings. It would be disingenuous of me to claim that the proposals won't change anything. As is correct, though, the possible impacts have been examined in the finest detail, and as you've seen, the proposals have evolved to ensure that any impact will be minimal. As a result, the closest new building to the south is over 40 metres away from the nearest dwelling, and the new grounds maintenance building to the west is over 80 metres away, both separated by dedicated planted landscape buffers. And I would add, with respect, and I'm going off script here, but with respect to the professional centre bedroom accommodation windows, they are not 40 metres away. They are a considerable distance further away from the dwelling in question, over the other side of the car park. The section that was on screen, I don't think accurately captures the relationship there, and possibly we can revisit that with some questions. All operational areas also and access routes have been moved as far away as possible, with the scheme overall having been designed with the first priority being to fit comfortably around these dwellings. I'd also stress that the barn on site currently in use as Doncaster City Academy, which sits much closer to the dwellings and which has been subject to some existing concern around noise impacts, will be removed completely as a result of the proposals, meaning a reduction in noise as a result. In that respect, environmental health officers have confirmed that they are fully satisfied with the proposals and have no concerns with respect to noise. That's not just our report saying that, but it's obviously, again, to stress as a result of your own officers. The same goes for lighting, with the landscape buffers eliminating any potential impact, the lighting strategy having been cautiously designed to the minimum levels necessary on a system that allows for manual dimming if necessary. In terms of the scale of the proposals, the times when most people will be on site are extremely limited, most likely just a handful of occasions per year for larger community and schools events for children at the professional centre. And stress on this point in no uncertain terms that this is not for a professional team to play regular matches nor with crowds. Officers are of course right to acknowledge that the character of the immediate environment will to a certain extent change for the neighbours, but the test in a planning decision is not whether there's any change, it's whether there are any unacceptable impacts, as you've heard. And as a result of the extensive mitigation and the careful design work, your own officer's conclusion is that any impact will be modest and acceptable. Moving on now to focus, most importantly, on the massive benefits of the scheme. It delivers a step change in Doncaster's sporting and community infrastructure, where currently the council's own evidence notes a dire shortfall in provision. It creates a permanent home for elite football training, yes, attracting top footballing names to the area, alongside an integrated academy, crucially, with a full programme of grassroots and community uses. This is not tokenistic access, but it's a legally binding agreement that will guarantee access amounting to effectively full-time community use for a full-size 4G pitch with affordable pricing, provision for underrepresented groups, access for schools, and a full-time outreach role to ensure this all happens. Simply put, what this means is giving permanent access to top-level facilities to hundreds, if not thousands of people across the area every year, where currently they struggle to access any kind of pitch at all. Economically, the benefits are equally substantial. 244 direct local jobs and an extra 295 jobs in the supply chain during the construction phase. At least 57 permanent full-time jobs created once the centre is operational. £49 million of gross value added to the economy per year during construction, and then a further 2.8 million of gross value added to the local economy every year permanently once the site is operational. Officers are clear that very special circumstances exist for the proposal. All policy tests are passed, and there are huge benefits ready to be delivered, including some...
Then. Sorry about that, your turn's run out.
That's fine. I'd welcome any questions that members might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll ask committee members if they wish to ask any questions of Mr Dunn and any questions in relation to his submission. Can I also advise you that the technical support, which is David Keel and Alex Wells, who work for KSS, who's the architects, and Mr James Simpson, who's from the Devonton Group, are in attendance to answer any technical questions also. Bob, you can go first.
Thank you. The 499-seater stadium, obviously there'll be a lot of issues with traffic when that's full. How often will that be used a year?
As I say, it's only proposed for a handful of times, and the degree, the extent and the number of times that can be used really remains under the control. Even if you resolve to grant permission today, it will remain under your control as a result of the conditions that are going to be applied to any consent. And just appreciate your comment there about traffic impacts, but your own highways officers have confirmed that actually there won't be significant or any sort of unacceptable impact on the local highway network as a result of that, even in an assumed worst case scenario.
So the actual stadium will only be full a handful of times a year?
That's right, and again, I certainly wouldn't call it a stadium. It's effectively it's a rack of seats, and the architects have just sat next to me, so in that respect, if there's any further clarification, then they can certainly add the detail as well.
So on that then, there's actually will only be a few occasions where the stadium will be full that might support the local economy?
Well, as you've heard, the vast majority of the economic benefit doesn't necessarily derive from loads of people coming to watch football and then spend money in Bawtry. It's the deeper impact, it's the employment, it's the investment as a result of construction and all that sort of thing.
Just on the employment, can you say how many jobs, local jobs, maybe are created?
Yeah. During construction, 244 direct and an extra 295 within the supply chain. That's during the construction phase, that number through the economic activity.
I'm more interested in going
permanently within operation, 57 full-time jobs.
How will it benefit the local community who won't be part of the elite setup? You know, schools, young boys, girls, etc. Will there be capacity for youngsters to be able to see any elite footballers training, drop-in days, things like that?
Exactly that, yeah. And that's part of why the community use agreement includes an entire role that will be someone's full-time job as a result of this within the operation of the scheme to arrange that community involvement. And that doesn't just include kids going on and playing football on the pitches, but it will include that integration within the community, people going out from the facility as well into local schools, and that's legally binding into the nature of granting any permission on the scheme.
And obviously there will be a cost for schools, etc., using these facilities.
Possibly, but not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. I mean, the wording as it's currently agreed within the draft community use agreement is that there is affordable pricing to be inbuilt and to be agreed. But the fact remains that that will be within the council's gift to agree that subsequently. And I know I've had conversations with the applicant team who would certainly be open to even more sort of generosity in that respect.
Yeah, just the last question. I just picked up on the overlooking where Mrs. King said it was 40 metres. You said it's a lot further. How much further?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can get a strong impression if we brought the site plan up, because the one dimension that we do know is absolutely fixed is between the closest point of the professional centre and the closest neighbouring dwelling is, as the officer said, 40.3 metres. And you can see if the site plan was brought up that the distance then further on to where that accommodation is proposed in the professional centre is substantially greater than that.
Thank you.
I think we'll be able to ask officers that later, Bob. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm always very suspicious about the term "in the community." I don't live in a community, I live in a society. So how small a community do you think this will serve? When you're talking about it's a great value to the people of Doncaster, not to the majority of people of Doncaster. I know football is very popular, but they're a minority. It is a minority sport. So how is it of benefit to Doncaster at large?
I don't know. I don't think it's sort of fair to insinuate that any planning application needs to be able to demonstrate that a majority of any given population directly benefits. Although what I would say is that when I was speaking, there were some letters of support from the wider community or indeed society on the screen, which included direct letters of support from several local football teams, local junior football teams. So no, it would be impossible, of course, to say for us to prove that the majority of a given local population would directly benefit. But it's clear from the evidence that's been submitted within the application that a very large and substantial number of people who are engaged in sport, who do want to have better access to sport, will be able to directly and substantially benefit on a permanent basis. And that's not just people who are already engaged. We've had conversations with a number of different officers, including sports liaison, football foundation officers, as part of the application and before it was submitted. And within the community use agreement, there are mechanisms built in to not just say, oh yeah, this team wants to play football, they can play it here, but to expand that and to reach out to bring more people and more local people to make use of the facilities.
Yeah, okay. So I'm always suspicious of in the community. And, you talk about...
That's fair enough.
Sports foundation officers, they've got a vested interest. Of course they want it. But the point I'm making, it will have very little impact, minimal impact on the majority of people of Doncaster. Would you not agree with that?
I think that is probably fair to say. But that only goes so far as any given individual person's desire to take advantage of what's on offer. They'd be perfectly able to get involved in a club that makes use of the facilities.
As the architect for the scheme, I'd like to make one point, if I may, in response to that. Whilst it may not have a significant impact across the whole of the community, it will have a massive impact on the people that engage within that centre. So any young kids and the adults that go with it, they go on a regular basis to train, to improve their health and their well-being and their ability to enhance their skills to whatever level they get to. That makes a huge difference because they don't have that at the moment. Now, we've done these all over the country for professional clubs. They have a significant outreach into schools. They have a significant outreach into the community. And they provide facilities which you've heard from the gentleman earlier don't exist. So providing them gives them the opportunity. If you build it, they will come. Definitely happens. It's a fact. So you will provide, however many people it is, the ability to do things that they currently don't have any opportunity to do.
Yeah, well, if we can just come back to that, you know, I'm sure as a company, you're not doing this for the good of all. You're doing it for profit. So
I'm an architect. I design. I don't run these. I've designed 6 of the world's leading training centres across multiple sports. So I can tell you what the impact it has. Whether it runs for profit or not is nothing to do with me. I'm just designing it. I'm telling you what we design it to be and how they currently function on other clubs all around the country and all around Europe.
Yeah, well, I'm not attacking you in any way. You're an architect. No doubt you are hired to do a job, and I'm sure you do it exceedingly well. But the developers are only doing it for one reason. They're not doing it for any altruistic ways at all. You're doing it to make money. So I think for the good of young people and junior football clubs, that is a way they make money.
If I may, Chair, it's important to draw a distinction here, I think, between the elite centre and the professional centre, the two sides of the site. The elite centre will effectively subsidise the professional centre that the community will have access to. So the community access to the site is not in any sense a money-making exercise, quite the opposite, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you didn't have the community side, it's unlikely you'd get planning permission for the rest of it. So you're not doing it after the good of your heart. That is a way to inspire us to maybe approve this application.
That's probably fair to say, but I'd suggest that a decision doesn't necessarily need to be made on your perceptions of the motivations of why it's being secured, but it's critical that in reflecting on your decision here, that your officers have sought and been able to secure through legally binding agreements the benefits and the outcomes, regardless of what has motivated those benefits and outcomes.
Thank you for your answer.
I just wanted to clarify, members, as I'm sure you're aware, that profit levels or otherwise is not a matter for consideration. I just want to make that clear. I understand why the question was asked, but it's not something we can take into account when making your decision. Thank you.
It's Steve's first, then Glenn, and you're next, Paul. Okay, so Steve.
Thank you, Chair. And it really over where your statement of 244 local construction workers. Where are they going to come from? I'm assuming you're stating that they are local is a fact and not an assumption. So if that being the fact, have you already had the quotes and know the company that's going to do it?
No, we're able to state that because any planning permission that may or may not be granted would be subject to a condition that requires local employment and skills.
And that is generally a percentage. It wouldn't be the full amount. So are you standing as a statement of fact that it's 244 local construction workers?
No, and forgive me if my phrasing there wasn't quite 100% accurate, but I'm not able to claim that every single construction worker is local. Who, you know, what definition of local even is there? But it remains the case that it would fully within the control of the council to dictate the terms of the local employment and skills plan that would be conditioned.
So what we're basically saying is there's going to be 244 jobs building it, 295 jobs in supply chain, but where possible, everybody's going to be local.
Absolutely, as far as possible. And again, as I say, I'd stress, Chair, that the nature and level of requirements within that employment and skills plan remains, whatever decision is made today remains within the gift of your officers, or indeed yourself if they need to refer the final form of that to you.
And then the 57 jobs that are going to be maintained, are they all going to be local?
Unless those people want to commute every day from hours and hours away, then assuming people would be, full-time employed on the site, then one can assume that they're likely to be local people.
What I'm looking for more for is there's no job there that's really professional where you've got to import them from abroad.
Certainly not that they need to be imported from abroad. No, I mean there are specialist jobs going to be involved in the running of the facility. But again, we can refer back to the employment and skills training plan and the outreach to provision of apprenticeships and the outreach to the college and further afield Sheffield Hallam University. That is all meant to be integrated into part of this to ensure that those benefits do remain as local as possible.
Thank you. Glenn?
This is Chair. Yeah, I didn't like to hear the bit where somebody was getting intimidated about it. Can't you just get your heads together and buy the bungalows?
I cannot comment on that personally. I sit here as the planning agent for the application, and I'm not aware of any details with respect to antisocial behaviour or intimidation or purchases or possible purchases. I mean, I can clearly see that would be a solution to the matter, certainly with respect to potential impact on amenity of the neighbouring dwellings. But here today we've got a planning decision to be made, and I can see why you may feel that's a solution to one of the planning matters under consideration, but there's a planning decision to be made on planning grounds, and in that respect I'd refer back to your officer's conclusions on those matters.
I don't.
Bob?
Yeah, on page 15 it says the facility will be used mostly through the football season. So when it's not football season, what activities will go on there?
When it's not the football season for professionals, it would likely just remain in use, only the community uses.
And just on going back on what the architect says, I totally get it, the health and well-being of the children and the adults that will use it, but also on the flip side of that, it's the health and well-being of also residents that you didn't mention that will be affected if this is approved.
The point I was making was that anybody using it in the community centre are going to benefit from that. So that there'll be local residents, presumably, or local kids all coming into that. As far, if I may just add on your first question, the football calendar runs the whole year. So this is, in terms of pre-season, in terms of international tournaments, in terms of international teams coming in, or women's under-19 England squad training somewhere for a game that they may be playing in Doncaster or Newcastle. They all have to train somewhere. They all have to prepare somewhere. So those things happen all year round now. It's not just within the football season.
Right, Steve next, then Rob, then Majid. Steve?
I've listened very carefully to what's been said. Community benefits appear to be minimal. This looks to me like a development for an elite group of people who have little or no connection to Doncaster. What are the benefits to Doncaster?
Chair, if we're sort of seeking to quantify the number of people who might benefit from this, then I would suggest that overwhelmingly that falls on the side of the community and local people. Many more people, members of the community, will be using this centre than professional footballers. Yes, of course, as has been pointed out, this is ultimately a commercial venture, and the elite, quote unquote, side of the site is designed to be profitable, and as I've pointed out, that will subsidise the community access on the other side of the site. But the intensity of the use, the number of people who will be using that elite side will pale in comparison to the number of people who will, from the local community, who will be able to use and have access to the professional centre. As you've seen on the screen during the officer's report, the community use agreement establishes at least 40 hours per week, effectively full-time access to one of these pitches, if you're looking at when people will actually reasonably be able to make use of the facility. So I'd reiterate that. I'd suggest the community benefits are enormous, and I think you don't have to rely on my word for that. I've got the gentleman who spoke earlier at the end of the row next to me, speaking as a parent, as a coach of a local junior team. You've got the letters in support of the application, and I would flag that of comments made to the application, the majority were comments of support rather than of objection. And whilst I was speaking on the screen, there were extracts shown further, as I've mentioned before, for not only letters of support from professional teams, but letters of support from numerous local junior and grassroots teams who want to see this happen. And that, as I say, you don't have to rely on Chair on believing me. You've got the evidence in front of you to show that there's a really large number of local members of the community who are desperate to see this delivered and to make use of it.
Does that answer your question, Steve, or do you want another one?
So can you just tell me, if the community wish to use these facilities, how will they access these facilities, and will they be free of charge?
I can't give you a guarantee now that it will be free of charge, because that's going to be subject to the agreement of the final form of the community use agreement. If members felt that was a necessity to deem the community uses substantial enough to sway their decision, then I would imagine, although defer to your officers, that any decision today could be made on that basis, because that's to be secured via a condition. In terms of how they access the facilities, then, as mentioned, part of that community use agreement is any operator will be required to employ a full-time outreach officer whose entire job will be ensuring that the community can make use of, not just saying, yes, our team wants to use it, you can use it, but going out into schools, going out into the community, there'll be their entire role to make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Rob, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Dunn, I do want to commend you for your good spin and bring it back to planning perspective. I appreciate your position on that, and also our position in terms of the planning process, but also we are residents and councillors, and we are accountable really to the residents of Doncaster as well. So that does come into our thinking, whilst our decision is to be made on planning merit. The reason I think why members are pushing on the community element is because of the tension with the few residential properties around there. And if this was a purely commercial venture, blighting 3 properties, it would be more of a negative sway, as opposed to having this additional community element to it as well. I think that's why members are trying to push for more commitment and assurance on the community element and the local element as well. the fact that you're not able to provide either concrete assurances on local employability, where those people are coming from, or exactly what the community, how the community will access it, whether it's free of charge, is at this point disappointing, considering how long your applicant has gone through with this process. My presumption is, and correct me if this is incorrect, that this development will have some public funding either through Sport England, Football Foundation, those other such bodies. They will also provide funding for other community football ventures across Doncaster. I know in my ward, the Football Foundation gave a few £1,000s to a pavilion on Town Field for football facilities. So if we're holding this facility up as a bastion of community football outreach in Doncaster, it's not that. And I think as well because the community liaison and project officer that you mentioned, there's a similar function to that at Club Doncaster with the Doncaster Rovers, who also use their outdoor pitches there as well for school outreach, youth outreach, and also minority ethnic outreach as well. None of that's been detailed so far in the plans. Going back to one of the questions I asked the applicant, I apologise, I'm making a lot of points here. Going back to one of the questions I asked the applicant, the resident rather, is that development on greenbelt land needs to meet very specific circumstances. And going back to what the architect said, sorry, so I don't know if it was Mr. Wells or Mr. Curl, you said that you've done this all over the country and that you've designed six of the top performing centres like this. So is this very specific circumstance to build on a green belt here?
To pick up on a couple of your points, the only reason that I'm not able to guarantee that public access will be free or guarantee a specific number of local jobs is because they remain subject to condition. Whatever the condition requires, whatever chair your officers require in order to make that acceptable will be the case. And I would also clarify, really firmly stress that this is completely privately funded. There is absolutely no public funding necessary to secure this, so it would not be taking away from public funding that would be otherwise directed anywhere else. David.
With respect to very special circumstances in the green belt, we've done many more than six, but we've done six that are considered to be world class. Four of those are in the green belt. All of them reached the. In each of those cases, the council decided that it met the very special circumstances. The issue about green belt and openness and its use for sport and recreation is clear. I think the officer's report considers that in some considerable detail, and I will defer to him on that. But there are many instances where these facilities of a certain size are very difficult to find in urban areas, and they inevitably tend to be on the fringes in green areas with green grass, and that's ultimately why they end up being there. But in terms of whether it meets that, your office has given you very clear guidance on that.
Chair, on that point from a planning perspective, if I may add, with respect to the very special circumstances argument, as you might imagine, coming to an agreement with your officers on that matter has been a lot of a much deeper, more complex conversation than is possible to be summed up in the officer's report or through the presentation today. And as part of that conversation, we've made reference to and had deep discussions about some of the comparable very special circumstances cases for training centres around the country where they have been granted permission, whether that's by members at a committee or by appeal. And consistently what we found is actually the community benefits on offer are much, much less than are on offer today. That's because invariably those training centres are for specific professional football clubs, and so the benefit is tied to the prominence of a given football club within a community or indeed a society in that local area. In this case, we don't have that to fall back upon, and therefore the community benefits on offer are enhanced massively more than has been necessary to demonstrate very special circumstances in other scenarios. Really significantly greater. In fact, in most of those other scenarios where very special circumstances have been found, generally public or community access to the sites at all is not allowed. They are completely private facilities, and the community access and benefits rely only upon those clubs going out into the community. This is something completely different and well, it's completely unique in terms of the level of access and benefit on offer.
So can I just add one question back to architects? You said that you've built 6 world-class and numerous other facilities. How many of them have got a couple of houses in the middle of it? Which reminds me a little bit of, you know, the house in the middle of M62. That's what I'm seeing here. I've got a little house in the middle of M62. How many others have got that?
There are a number of training centres that come to mind that have residences either immediately adjacent to it, or I can't think of any that have one right in the middle of it, because generally that's not how it's worked out. But certainly the Tottenham Hotspur Training Centre, which we did have 6 or 7 sitting in one corner of it, have immediately affected, and many of the facilities around the country have houses in much closer proximity than this. So I'm not in any way trying to diminish the impact that any training centre has on there, but they're limited in their use. You know, they're not 6 in the morning until 10 at night. They tend to happen for periods of time. Certainly in terms of the professional side, in the elite side, they train for 2 hours a day outside, absolute maximum.
I'll stop you there then. So answer is none of them goes around a house, but a lot of them boardroom. Yeah. That's correct, yeah? Right, Rob, sorry I cut you short there. Sure, carry on, yeah?
It's all right, thank you, Chair. I've got so many points swirling around my head, I don't know which order to do them.
Go first.
No, I'm on a roll. Just in relation to you picked up then about hours of operation, you said that really they only do for a couple of hours at a time. In one of the three of the conditions, they say about the training pitches, the show pitch, and the indoor pitch. The times on those, the indoor pitch can be operated from 7:30 till 10 at night. That's the largest operating hours, and the other ones are hours between there as well. So operationally, might be shorter hours at a time. However, that's the maximum it can be open for. Mr. Dunn, I commend you for your spin on the planning aspect of this. In my view, the whole spiel about it being for community benefit and how other professional and elite training pitches don't have this is purely to ensure that it gets past that planning committee because of the impact on the residents here. Whilst there might be other applications like this across the country that are in greenbelt land, that's not something we can actually take into consideration part of this application. But the existence of those across the country surely shows that it's not very specific circumstances. If this was a one-off in the UK, I'd be more considered to be of that frame of mind. But if there's multiple across the country, it might be badged as St George's Park in the north, but in a couple of years' time, you or your clients in this area might create another one north of Leeds, which has got, unfortunately, a higher footballing pedigree in this area. The principal matter for me, and I think it does come into material consideration for impact on residents, is that the applicant hasn't engaged in good faith with the property owners to buy these properties. If the applicant had have bought these properties, we wouldn't still be here now.
Sorry, Councillor Dennis, I don't want to cut off your flow, but I just want to make absolutely clear that matters of land ownership and purchase are not material planning considerations. So whether you object to the lack of engagement or not, that is not something that you can take into account. I just wanted to make that very clear.
Thank you, Stacey. I do take your point, but it's consideration for me in my deliberation that because there are residents there, because there hasn't been a property sale, that's causing this tension between the development and the residents in that area. That's what's in my view.
Thanks, Chair. Just with respect to hours of operation, what you've seen, what's been tested within, for instance, the noise impact assessment, is absolute worst case, maximum sort of conservative scenario. And that's why those hours of operation are as such, as you've heard. Clearly no professional footballer is going to be playing football all day when it's not a game for them to play. These are short fits and starts. The majority of activity, and sort of relates to a point made earlier, will actually derive from the community uses, ironically enough. And in that respect, with respect to the community benefit and the spiel that I have apparently given, and the unique nature of the scheme, I'd suggest that it is a unique scheme because the difference in to the other very special circumstances cases that I've highlighted are that those schemes do relate to specific football clubs. It is a fact that there is no other, apart from St George's Park, which relates to the England football team, there is no other facility in the country of this kind that is not for a specific football club. So that's just a matter of fact. Whether one could speculate about what other schemes might come forward that are comparable in the future is completely hypothetical. Yeah, I just really like to stress again that I don't think, Chair, that it's not that it's not fair, but I don't think it's simply accurate to refer to the community benefits on offer as a spiel. As mentioned, they are materially, substantially greater. I can't stress enough the difference in level of what is on offer in terms of community access here versus any comparable scheme elsewhere is enormous. It's not spiel, that's legally binding access.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to clarify. I do appreciate the offer of the community support here, and also the Doncaster does have a lack of spaces for young footballers and also older footballers, as Mr. Hume may also be aware of Mental Health FC, who have various training sessions across the Doncaster as well. So clarifying that in general, I would be supportive of community access to footballing facilities.
Majid.
Chair, I've got a couple of questions and a few bits I need clarification on, just for clarity of my mind. So there might not be, material
to applicant though, yeah?
Sorry?
To applicant.
Yeah, to the applicant. But they might not be relevant for planning, but I just need to clarify in my mind.
Stacey will take for not.
Yeah. So, first of all, I mean, I have complete faith in Dave and the reports that he writes. Can you just clarify the point that you made earlier, that he's not been able to articulate correctly in the report pack today, the discussions or the opinions that have been formed in the discussions that you've had over the period that this planning application is put together? Is that what you said, or did I take my eye off the ball for a moment?
I certainly would not say that
That's how I heard it, that you were saying that our officers were unable to articulate correctly in the reports pack what the discussions that you've had. The point
referred primarily to the ability to articulate in the presentation today the depth of discussion, detailed planning policy discussion around this specific very special circumstances case. That's all.
So what you're saying is we need a further presentation with more detail. Is that what you're saying, so we can fully understand the level? And maybe the planning application today needs to be adjourned until that's prepared?
I wouldn't say that that's necessary. If you feel that's necessary, then
No, you're the one who stated that point. So I just want pure clarity in my mind, so I know what I need to be doing. That's all.
I was only seeking to reassure members
That our officers are unable to articulate properly. Okay, that doesn't really reassure me at all, though, I'm afraid.
No, I think you're putting words. Chair, I believe words are being put in my mouth.
I think that's clear here is that there's been lots of discussions, and Dave's made his report based on them discussions, and he's tried to describe a brick in 1,000 words, but there's been 10,000 words between both sides. Yeah.
I share the opinion, Chair, of the members' faith in the officer's report.
Yeah, and I must admit I do as well. But I'm picking up on what Maggie said, which is he did actually say that there were more said than what's in report, and he's just trying to make clear is, are you saying that the report is substantial enough to support the application, or do you think you could do better?
No, I absolutely do. I misspoke in that respect, and I really meant with respect to the presentation, but clearly the officer's not going to have the opportunity to read out a 20,000 odd word report during the committee itself.
Badgie, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, Chair, like I said, I've got full faith in Dave. I've been working with Dave since I was first elected in 2014, and I've got full faith in the work that he does. That's why I was taken aback by the comments which were made. And that moves on to my next point around, I was elected in 2014. How long has the idea of this proposal or this planning application, not in its current iteration, but how long has this been going around, or how long have you been aware of this?
Chair, I'd like to just reiterate again myself on as the members just said there. I have a complete faith in the robustness of the report. The officer's been nothing if not thorough in the assessment of the application, and with respect to the lifespan, let's say, of the proposals, I personally have been involved for approaching. I would suggest a little over 2 years, whilst after the original pre-application was first submitted with respect to this scheme, and beyond that, the architects have also been involved, and I might briefly defer to David to allow to explain that a little greater.
Yeah, we commenced work at the end of 2022.
And were you aware of any ideas or any applications prior to that date for this site for a similar, if not the same, type of training facility?
Not aware of any further plans for that, no.
And back to you, Mr. Dunn. Excluding children's and junior football, are you aware of any football club which will be using the facility as its home ground or home place of practice?
I don't think it would be accurate, Chair, to say that any of these clubs would be using it as a home practice. No, certainly not anything other than junior clubs using the facilities as a regular place of training. It's no, absolutely not the case.
Sorry, maybe I'm not clear in the question I'm asking. So excluding any junior football clubs or any children's teams, so I'm talking about more senior teams here, are you aware of any team which might be using it as a home training ground, a home training facility, whatever word? I'm not sure. I'm not really big on football, so the terminology is a place that it would use as its home.
That helps, Chair. Thank you. And no is the answer.
Okay, and final question. I mean, this has really been playing on my mind, but going back to a point that you made earlier, and the applicant and others, and I've asked, is around the intimidation aspect and harassment. Were you made aware of any of this in any way, shape, or form?
I'm aware that, as you might expect, there are neighbourly disagreements in this situation. I'm not aware of anything that would amount to or be called, anything more with further legal repercussions. Is not something that I am sort of privy to.
Can we just ask Stacey 1 second?
Sorry, I'm going to tell you off again. Just want to make clear on anything that's been reported to the police or any allegations of crime. Again, not matters for you. I understand why you're asking, but just to be absolutely clear, you cannot take that into consideration in your decision. We're just dealing with planning merits.
Stacey, thank you again for your input, and I totally understand that, and I take it on board. Like I said, I'm taking a holistic view. I just want to be clear in my mind about things which have been said, done, and mentioned, and how reports have been formed. And my final question, Chair, is around what Councillor Dennis asked earlier, and I can't remember if we got a response on that, and what the exceptions for this planning application, why it meets the criteria, and why it should be passed in Greenbelt land.
With respect to that, Chair, I would refer members to the slide that the officer put on at the end of their presentation, where they provide a visual summary of their planning balance exercise that they've undertaken, weighing the harms against the benefits and applying different weights to those being clearly legally secured substantial community benefit, economic benefit, wider strategic sporting benefit, given the council's own evidence base about the lack of provision, biodiversity benefit, the planting of 450 trees, the applicant's offer of far in excess, in fact double the statutory requirement of biodiversity net gain, and so on.
Anybody else got any questions? Rob?
Chair, if it's okay, I've got 5, but I think they should be fairly quick.
Okay. If you can make it up.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn, I think in Dave's presentation, he mentioned about a potential crossing over the A638. I wasn't sure if that was in the document or not. Would you be able to expand on that from the applicant's point of view?
Yeah, so the proposals from a Transport Highways perspective improve crossing over the main road at the end of the access and putting in a pedestrian island to allow for people from Bawtry basically to walk to the site if they chose to, because that need is necessary to connect to the existing footpath on the other side of the road.
Fab, that's fine for me on that one. Who owns the land this will be built on, and when was it acquired?
The land is owned by the applicant, almost all of it. Some of it is owned by a neighbour, primarily where it's necessary to widen the access road, who is, as you might expect, given an application has been submitted, amenable to making that land available to allow the access to function properly. I have to say, Chair, I'm not sure when the applicant acquired the land.
Understood, thank you. I'm on question 3 of 5. The quality of jobs, the permanent jobs after the development is completed, I think it's around 50-something. Which sort of sector will the majority will these jobs be in? Were they hospitality, grounds maintenance, that sort?
Exactly, they'll range from hospitality, grounds maintenance, physios and sports therapies, nutrition, that sort of thing, and quite possibly David, who's more familiar with the type of proposal, may choose to add some more in there.
No, I think you've covered it. The landscaping and grounds maintenance will be quite a few, and then obviously maintenance of the building and running the building.
Thank you. You brought me on to landscaping. The resident mentioned about the height of the trees that will be planted will only really get to a suitable height to prevent overlooking after about 15 years. Is there anything the applicant can do to purchase larger trees that could be put in, or additional screenage?
They absolutely can, yeah, and naturally the application or any permission that may be forthcoming would be subject to condition that would require full details of it, all landscaping and planting, and if members or officers felt that it was necessary for mature or heavy, as it's often sort of technically known, trees to be planted as part of that to ensure the appropriateness and the acceptability of a landscaping scheme, then that again, as I've said on a number of sort of technical points, remains entirely within the gift of the local authority to secure.
Thank you. And for my final question, Chair, it's just about the blockage of light that the resident mentioned. This might be something that officers come into in terms of the noise and the light, but I just wonder if there's anything you want to add from the applicant's side.
I would only add and clarify that shadow studies have been undertaken that demonstrate that the scheme is acceptable in that respect, and I'd stress again the distances involved here are substantial and significant, substantially in excess of separation distances that, in certainly speaking as a planning consultant who deals with all kinds of different applications, far in excess of distances that I've ever encountered before would normally be considered to have any sort of harmful impact or bearing on neighbouring properties.
Bob?
Yeah, it's just a point really, Chair. I've listened to all sides of the arguments, but for me personally, I would have been more happy if an agreement could have been reached between the applicant and the residents.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just going back to the crossing on Bawtry Road. Now, all the locals will know Bawtry Road is the original A1, and it's still a major route for people coming off the A1 through Bawtry and into Doncaster. I think the idea of a light control crossing there is madness. It's an accident waiting to happen. If there's going to be a crossing there, why not put a footbridge over the road? All right, be more expensive. This development's costing millions. It'll be insignificant on the overall budget. So be against the Pelican crossing, a footbridge if required. Whether it's required is arguable, I would think.
Chair, I clarify that it's not a light-controlled crossing that's proposed, and the reason that a footbridge or otherwise is not proposed is because your highways officers did not feel that was necessary, nor did the highways consultant who the applicant has employed to put together the transport assessment. All officers, all highways and transport experts who've been involved in the scheme, that's not only those advocating on behalf of the applicant, but your own officers, the local highways authority, have found that the proposed arrangements with respect to highways are completely acceptable and safe.
You say it's not a light control crossing. What kind of crossing is it?
It's a pedestrian island.
That is an accident waiting to happen. Thank you.
Anyone got any more questions? No. Only thing I'd like to pick up on is the consultation. Do you agree with what the objectors have said about you consulting with them, and why didn't you come back to them regarding questions that they proposed to you and seem to ignore them and the solicitors?
With respect to, well, Chair, I take it that your question is more with respect to direct liaison with the neighbours rather than public consultation as a whole, and I can't speak for the applicant in that respect. I'm sorry, that's perhaps not the most helpful answer to you, but that is the answer that I'm able to give you, and without asking the applicant to come and speak.
Yeah, just be noted that the objectors did say that they tried to consult with you, and not you personally, but with the scheme, and they felt that it were all one direction. So I just wonder if you could elaborate on that, but based on what you said there, I think the answer's straightforward, that you didn't manage to do it.
What I am aware of, Chair, is I understand, and if I may defer to Mr. Jarvie next to me, my understanding is that as also his role is also as the local agent and surveyor on behalf of the applicant, who did. Ross, please do correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that he did seek or request access for evaluation of the neighbours' properties in order to begin conversations around a purchase, which was not possible. That's besides the point, really, Chair, and I stress again,
So
we're
I didn't mean
speculating
to aim
into
it at you
non-planning
personally.
matters.
I were aiming it at you as the team. So if somebody else wants to elaborate on that, it'd be great.
Yeah, I do understand that there has been and believed to be conversations, but as I understood it, that the acquisition or otherwise, obviously it was. There's nothing really happened because obviously there's no planning in place. So I'm not privy to any sort of specific details of. There's certainly no. I don't believe there was any heads of terms agreed. I think there's been some conversations, but nothing more than that. I wasn't the agent acting on behalf of the acquisition. So I believe there have been some valuations undertaken.
Chair, I'm really sorry. On what regard is Mr. Jarvie speaking on it? Because he's listed here as. On behalf of the Portrait Retail Association, and now we found out he's an agent for the application.
Sorry, I was just trying to get clarity from Dave on that myself. I think Dave can speak to that slightly. Go, Dave.
Well, it was only reference to the fact that was it something involved with valuation? I don't know.
Yeah, I think Dave's just said to me that perhaps Mr. Jarvie, is it that you are a local surveyor involved in valuations, but members, as I've already advised you, land ownership, purchases or otherwise, it's not a matter you can take into consideration. I understand why you're concerned about it, but those are not material planning considerations. And go on, Steve.
What my question was, I just wanted to understand why the consultation went anywhere further. That's what I was inquiring about. The objectors have said that we didn't think that they were consulted enough. In the pack, I'm reading here that claims of inadequate resident consultation, unresolved land ownership, and then underneath it says, and a further round of consultation followed by amended plans, and it were all about other people, but not necessarily the people in middle of M62. These two families.
Chair, I think on that point, perhaps we should draw a distinction between formal planning consultation on updated and amended plans and reports and any separate commercial conversation or indeed neighbourly conversation between those parties that you mentioned.
I'm getting it were important that they're your stakeholders. They're your stakeholders. There's two families in the middle of this 37-acre complex, and that's why we're wondering, why did we stop on consultation? Why do they feel like they've not been involved? And is it true? Are they lying to us?
Chair, I'd not accuse anyone of lying or
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm saying
No.
I want to know truth. I want to know exactly what's happened. Why do the objectors feel like the consultation was ignored when the solicitors wrote to you, when they spoke to you? That's all I want to understand. Did it happen or not?
I can't speak to that. I'm sorry, Chair. As the planning agent on this, I am unable to, and I'm not. Let me clarify. I'm not saying I am unwilling to. I am unable to offer you any sort of knowledge in that respect.
Stacey's going to add.
So I just wanted to add that I think we're talking possibly about two separate things. We're talking about the planning consultation process, so where the local residents were consulted on the planning application, and we're also talking about the matter with which the resident put forward about.
I'm just talking purely about consultation.
So just to be clear, matters of land ownership and purchase not relevant for members. Impacts on those local residents in terms of enjoyment and their amenities, definitely an issue for local residents. And I think you've had your question answered now about consultation, but I'm sure you can ask the same question to Dave in officers' questions as well. Thank you.
Just to be clear, nobody else got any more questions? Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I find this absolutely amazing. And yeah, we get it, the planning, we've got to follow the process. But to listen to one of the supporters being involved in conversations with the applicant and the architects and the company, there's no way I could support this. And that's before we've gone to deliberation. I'm sorry, but that's just my view and how I feel.
Right. Do officers wish to clarify any of the comments that have been made? I'm sure they do. Dave?
Where do you want me to start? perhaps two things. One, it might be more productive if through the form of debate you want to ask me questions on the various subjects that have been covered in some detail. And that might sort of be a bit easier to follow then. Just in terms of consultation, and pick up on directly on a point about how have we got to this point in the last 4 years. So in terms of pre-application inquiries to the council, that began in 2021, and that was then subject to further 2 pre-application inquiries in the sort of following 2 years after that. In terms of the consultation with the affected residents, we've, go back the same number of years. We've been in contact not only on this application, but on a previous application. So in terms of my input and the involvement of the council, that was a fairly early stage where I've met with the residents. I'm clear of their concerns and understanding where they're coming from. And then through the screening process in terms of the development, screening it as to whether it's EIA development, there was further representations through the neighbours. We've kept in, I think it's fair to say we've kept in contact throughout the last 4 years on this site about Martin Grange, but generally about these proposals that are coming forward. And then yes, coming to the application, the actual, this planning application has been in less than a year. It's, I think it was around March 2025, I think it was actually submitted. So there was that initial round of public consultation at that point. Representations were received, and then we've gone into a series of amendments, as Charles, Mr. Dunn alluded to, quite detailed amendments. And I've discussed some of them in the presentation, but then a second round of consultation, obviously, with residents. I think it's fair to say there's numerous representations from Mr. and Mrs. King and others who live on the site, and at various stages of the last, sort of, since the application was submitted in March. So I would like to say that the involvement with the residents on behalf of the council has been substantial. When it comes to, property purchase and so on, I don't know anything about that either, and it's not relevant to this consideration of this planning application, but I just want to make that clear that in terms of the planning application, and principally the amendments around the central part of the site, that's purely based on your officers pushing back on making amendments in respect of the representations, and through the technical reports then requiring them to demonstrate that the revised arrangement works. So I can perhaps then lead into other questions, but hopefully that might clear up some of the consultation and engagement with the neighbours.
Thank you for that, Dave. So committee members will now go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer any questions? Start off with Bob, then it's Chris.
Yeah, just on the noise assessment, did it take into account when the 499-seater stadium is full?
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. The short answer is yes. The noise impact assessment was done based on a worst case scenario. So of the sort of emitting noises, if you like, that's the elite and show pitches, which you refer to, the fixed external plant, the car park activity, and the sort of general activity around the grounds maintenance building. So the each of the properties the baseline levels to each of the properties was established, and then using modelling and the predicted sounds from these various sources, they're able to then assess the impact on these properties. That includes the cumulative impact, and I set out, and perhaps I can bring up the slides again, but essentially, yeah, the loudest of the potential noises, if you like, was from the pitch operations, but they were still within the 50 decibel agreed guidance limit, which Sport England say is acceptable for those who are living near artificial pitches. So they're going to hear audible sounds of, people playing football, boards being struck and so on, but they are audible, they're not harmful in terms of the range of decibels in terms of Sport England guidance. So a long way of saying yes, Councillor Anderson, the noise impact assessment was done based on a worst case scenario with all the pitches occupied and the show pitch being in use at the same time.
Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just reading page 11 of our pack, Human Rights Implications, item 2, and it's in general, members should consider whether the interference whether the interference of the development pursues a legitimate aim such as economic well-being. I think that's pretty debatable whether it does, but the most important thing are the rights of others to enjoy their property. Now, in my opinion, there is no doubt about it. It is interfering with the rights of others to enjoy their property.
Dave is taking literally page 11. It's a different case, but it's the same concept I think he's getting at.
Can I turn your mic off?
Oh, sorry.
So I get that, Chris. Has anybody else got to add to that? Rob?
Dave, I'm going to be a pedant. Informative 12, it doesn't have the dates on it. Just to add the relevant dates onto there, it's just got a few question marks. I can't provide a page number, but informative 12.
Issue 7, Trent Water.
Yeah.
If you go on to planning, have a look at it already. It's you have to fill it in.
And a second, not quite as pedantry one is in the informatives. I couldn't see the informative either from Business Doncaster or the Chamber about local employed people. My understanding is we can't include it as a planning condition, but it's an informative that we regularly put in to have locally employed people at the site. So it's just whether that could be included.
Yeah, sorry, on informative 12, that should date the consultation response received from 7 Trent Water. I don't know what happened there. That was clearly late in the day on that one. And yeah, in respect of the informative from Business Doncaster, Chamber of Commerce, it's not really my intention to try and sell you the scheme, but just give you the facts, and a lot of those facts have already been said with regard to the economic benefits. These are quantified through their economic statement, which they're required to submit with the application. And if you've had sight of that, you'll see the 244 full-time jobs, construction jobs, sorry, that was mentioned in addition to the supply chain number of 295. Just on the question of are they local, it's impossible to quantify that really and secure that in a planning permission, because natural job markets vary, they cross boundaries, people work in different areas, more so these days. But in terms of the construction job benefits, the statement concludes that there is a strong likelihood that many positions will be filled locally because, and I'm not the expert, but according to the economic assessment, Doncaster has quite a self-contained labour market. So in terms of quantifying that with the application, you're right, there isn't a condition relating to there needs to be X number of jobs for local people, and as Mr. Dunn says, it's difficult to quantify what does local mean. But one of the obligations which I went into does include the local employment and skills plan, which is essentially something similar where an employer would work, or a development company would work with Business Doncaster and local employers to put it out to tender, say this is the requirement that we're required to, these are the construction jobs that are available. Can you meet that demand? And it will be through our Business Doncaster team that they will complete that local employment and skills plan along with other stakeholders. And that will secure for the jobs mentioned, apprenticeships, trainings, work placements, and partnerships with Doncaster College and, I understand, Sheffield Hallam University. So that's just one small aspect where nobody can guarantee you 100% of the jobs are going to be applicable from the Doncaster region, but there's that commitment on both sides, the council and the applicant, to capture that within the legal agreement and then work with a skills plan to try and deliver them, so local jobs.
Emma?
And just to follow up on that from Dave, it's worth mentioning as well that what that local employment and skills plan will also do is require annual reporting through it. So there'll be a mechanism for us to be checking their homework effectively to make sure that they are delivering on what they say they will. And linked to that in terms of the other benefits, as you were on the development, and why we say that means that the harms are clearly outweighed by those benefits, page 70 of your papers in terms of community use agreement, and that's something we've talked an awful lot about today, and I can understand that the rationale for that is that there's also provision in there within the section 106 for monitoring and remedial action provisions. So it's not a case that we would be accepting that the applicant would get their planning permission and go on their merry way, and then the community use wouldn't come forward. We'd be requiring a scheme of monitoring and remedial action should that not be coming to fruition as expected. Thank you.
Anyone else got to add? Rob.
Sorry, Chair. The resident mentioned about concerns about the noise impact assessment and the light overshadowing as well. Dave, are you able to address some of those concerns?
Sure, I'd be happy to perhaps touch on some of the amenity impacts. We'll go through the various components because there was a lot raised in questions earlier where I think some clarifications will be useful. In terms of noise, I do too much writing. So here we go. In terms of the methodology behind the noise impact assessment, the methodology has been accepted by the Environmental Health Officer. And why is that? Because, well, it follows the MPPG when it comes to noise. It follows Sport England's recognised assessment for how they look at artificial pitches and the noise impacts from them. And it also is assessed against the British standard BS 4142, which is the industry way of rating commercial and industrial noise. There's been no concerns from your officers and how the noise impact assessment has been constructed, the methodology used, the placement of the baseline, the tape recorders for a non-technical way, and then how that's modelled to provide that uplift and model what the sound will be in terms of noise, and then how the proximity to the properties, then how is it received at those receptors, at those residential dwellings. So in terms of the residents' response on noise, I'll give you the facts in that this is a professionally prepared report that's been tested as sound in terms of its methodology, and it brings the conclusions that I've already presented. There was another point, and I can't remember what that was. So in terms of light, a lighting study has been carried out by Bell's Lighting, and that's not only for the car park lighting near the residents, but each and every pitch across the site. You remember the old days of sort of the yellow hues of the old street lamps are long gone. You know, you've got quite focused, sharp, directional LED lighting that reduces overspill. I flashed in the presentation there the spill, if you like, from the car park, and that showed minimal spill into the surrounding boundary areas, well away from the residential properties, and only sort of skirted the residential curtilage itself. LEDs are also smart in the sense that you can program them to dim. As I mentioned, they can be turned off, they can be adjusted depending on where the site is, how much light is needed, and so on. So in terms of the conclusions and the lighting assessment, again, they were done to the recommended standards. The environmental health team have no concerns in respect to the lighting. And as an aside to that, that also includes the ecological implications for lighting in that location, which the ecology officer is happy with. To give members and residents full assurance, I know there's been criticism of conditions, but there are specific conditions around both noise and car park lighting. So that includes, for example, in terms of noise, this fixed, the condition 24, I think, is extremely detailed in the sense of how these, what emissions are expected, what are allowed, and also there's a sort of retrograde step where if a complaint is received, a further noise assessment is produced to back up those claims or not in respect of what they find. In terms of lighting, there's conditions around controlled use of obviously the operation of the training pitches in various forms. And there's a as well as the lighting plan, there's an overall site management plan that will govern the management of it. when lights are going to be turned off, what's the consultation process with residents if there's complaints or if there's an error or if something needs fixing. So there's controls within the planning permission, and it's within members' gift to tighten them, relax them as they see fit, to ensure that what the technical reports are saying are then carried through to the planning permission. The technical reports are emphatic on those two subjects. The impacts are acceptable. There's no unacceptable impact.
I think the other part of overshadowing, if I remember, the objectives put on the building was not necessarily shown properly in the overshadowing. So how does that affect the properties that are in question?
I'll stick to fact. In terms of separation distances, I don't know if we can get the presentation up again. I don't know, is that possible? Because it's. Are you on the right page? I am. I'm not on Facebook. There we go. Let's try and make it a little bigger. So this shows a section drawing with Martin Grange Cottage and Raven Glade. You might see then helpfully the image has included those separation distances. So I mentioned in the presentation, from the rear elevation of Martin Grange Cottage to the largest part of the PTC, which is the indoor pitch, that's 40.3 metres. You can see that where the indoor pitch is, there's an area that actually juts out that's closer. That's part of the PTC, obviously at ground floor level, but that's 35.5 metres. And there was questions around impact in terms of overlooking, and in terms of where the hotel bedrooms would be. The section drawing doesn't show it, but if you can see the left-hand part of the PTC, the extent that it's a solid section there, that's, if you like, the accommodation. And I've actually included the distance there in the bottom right of the screen there, in the distance between the rear elevation of Martin Grange Cottage and the PTC is 92.4 metres. As Mr. Dunn alludes to in his presentation, usually when you're looking at impact from residential to residential, the council's guidance is 21 metres, and obviously we won't apply that standard here, but you can see the distance between 92.4 and what is accepted at 21 metres. Officers conclude that that's more than sufficient distance to avoid any impacts in terms of privacy and overlooking, notwithstanding that obviously the property is single storey, and allowing for the fact that there are bedrooms at first floor, 92.4 metres is a significant distance.
And then second bit, with I think she described it as the right to light from the main building. Does that actually affect the yard as well? I think the one showing you through the different equinox.
Thought it was too quiet. This shows the equinox position, which is either the 21st of March or 21st of September, which way you look at it, but that's the BRE standard for assessing light at the most impactful part of the year. I should come on to the summer image, but in winter, obviously, people are less likely to use their gardens, and inevitably, with the sun's path in the sky, it's already very low. But this shows, if you like, it presents a scenario at 12 o'clock and then at 3 o'clock, and shows the position of the indoor pitch as the rectangular building in the middle, the PTC, then extends to the right-hand side, and then you've got show pitch on the left-hand side. There were rightly criticisms that the original shading studies didn't include the buildings, it just showed the landscaping. And you saw from the site visit that the landscaping, depending on the time of year, is either quite transparent or not. So upon advice, the applicants in the last few weeks or so have prepared these lighting studies which show both the building's impact as well as the landscaping to offer a more holistic scenario. And essentially what is summarised here is the position at 12 o'clock shows due shading of the indoor pitch, of course, but the distance separation to the two residential properties is such is that this falls then onto the landscaping, onto the boundary. And if you can see the dwelling itself is clear from any shading. And then at 3 o'clock, it shows as the sun pans round to the west, you know, those shadows obviously lengthen as you go later into the day. But again, if you're looking at the overall sort of overshadowing of the curtilage of the neighbour, I would say that's an acceptable impact. And in respect, there was just a point whilst I pick up on it now, in terms of landscaping, the buffer area in between is essentially, yes, it will be landscaped. And the applicants have been very clear in just saying, well, it's the gift of the residents and the council, but obviously through the council, through condition, whether they would like substantial, extra heavy landscaping that provides immediate screening, or conversely, as you can see from the shading studies, is that going to make it worse? And would they prefer, you know, something more low maintenance and so on? I mean, it's part of the planning condition in the report that there's consultation with the neighbour in that regard, which is unusual, but I think positive in this situation to have that degree of negotiation should members decide to go with it. So in terms of landscaping, it's proposed based on the assumption that they would like to screen the development rather than keep it open, but that's open to negotiation if necessary. Does that answer the question?
So if that were December, how would that shadow look in December?
Sorry, I don't think I've actually got that, but essentially, in December, the huge swathes of the entire site are under shadow through large portions of the day as a result of the topography of the site. Because if you remember from the site visit, it drops away from south to north, and also the position of the sun in the sky. But essentially, yes, it shows significant shading across the entire site. It's not really a good representation of showing the impacts. And again, I'll stress that the BRE standard is to show it at the equinox limit there, which is the majority of the, you know, in terms of the impact, when people are more likely to use their gardens as opposed to winter.
Bob?
Yeah, just on the noise assessment, I just can't get away from the 499-seater. I totally appreciate you've done your assessment and it's underneath the recommendation, but I'm just trying to think of neighbours with 499 people, 22 players running around, a referee. I mean, I've got young couple that live 2 doors away. They have parties with 10 people and that's loud. I don't mind because they invite me, but you know, I'm just trying to... but just the impact, 499 people, like I say, there's 22 players, the referee, just...
I could break that down into two parts. The first being, like you say, the noise from an event, and going back to the debates before, it's anticipated that show pitch is used, it's termed a handful of times. In the report, it's conditioned to be 50, but there's no rhyme or reason behind that figure. It's within members' gift to shorten, increase that, however they want to do that. So in terms of the number of events that the show pitch would use, obviously there's the community aspect involved in they have access to the show pitch. So we wouldn't necessarily want to restrict access too tightly, but it's within members' gift to control the use of that should they wish to do so. And then with respect to the various noise and transport assessments, Councillor, absolutely, which is why they've both been sort of done based on a worst case scenario. So in terms of transport, it would envisage that 200 cars, roughly 200 cars, would arrive on the site within an hour, which is a sort of build up to a game. That would account for the amount of parking on the site, the spectators, the players, and so on. And even then, with it sounds like a lot, again, a handful of times a year, but there will be a short, sharp increased influx of traffic. But again, the noise assessments say that when you lengthen it out into sort of general amenity impact, it's within acceptable limits. That's as far as I can take it. I'm not going to say there won't be an impact. There will be a busy period as in any near a school, near a hospital, wherever. But they're fairly limited to specific times of the day on the handful of occasions where the event takes place.
And just on the neighbours' point, it was a bit of a joke, but it just, to me, just shows how neighbours can work together.
Let me just say that, you know, in terms of the report and the assessment, obviously Greenbelt is of the highest importance, but from the assessment perspective, we're assessing what's presented to the council, and we have to, and we do that in line with planning policy and also obviously through the technical reports. But there's been a significant amount of work and amendments to the application as a direct result of the representations from the neighbours. So in that respect, you know, those views have been heard and factored into the application.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, when we're talking about noise, we're measuring on the decibel scale, which is a logarithmic scale, and it measures sound energy. How we perceive sound energy as noise depends very much on the type of noise. So I think it's quite confusing when you're looking at measurements in dBs and saying, oh, well, that's lower than that. That is the energy, but the energy depends on the frequency of the noise. It's not as easy as that. It's perceived noise, not sound energy. And they're different.
I accept that point, Councillor. You're right, noise is highly technical and subjective. One person might be accepted, you know, might accept a certain degree of noise that somebody else wouldn't, and that's completely understood. Yeah, I think the only comment I'll make that I haven't made already is that the decibel levels are those industry accepted methods that are endorsed by Sport England.
Anyone else before we go to the vote? Bob?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, when I spoke about residents working together, I was talking about the applicant and, you know, the neighbours.
Any more questions before we vote? There's a massive omission I've noticed that it don't say out in there about England winning World Cup off the back of this. So that might be something to consider. But joking apart, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the imposition of planning conditions in a Section 106 legal agreement? No? Well, I'll say that I'm going to agree with it. Anybody want to second that? Right. So we're going to vote to reject the application. Anybody propose that? Chris, anyone want to second that?
Before we go, let's have reasons before we second it, please. Councillor Kidger.
Will you just say your reasons for rejecting it, Chris? What grounds have you got to reject it?
I think it's of little benefit to the people of Doncaster at large, and I think it is totally against the current residents, who we are obliged to take their interests into consideration. And I think it's a case of the few overrules the many.
Can I just draw a bit more from you on that? So you say it's of little benefit to the people of Doncaster at large. Can you elaborate? And also, what is it in particular that, in terms of the residents' impacts, that you are refusing for?
Material reason, because that's
I
what
think there's quite a few reasons. I mean, it doesn't meet the test against Greenbelt. I don't think it is special enough. I think it overrules the rights of the individual in this instance. Where that's not a planning issue, I think it is a fact. You can write it how you want legally.
Well, I can't put words into your mouth. I need to understand why it is that you think very special circumstances are not demonstrated, and what it is about the impacts, which impacts in particular, and why do you think they don't weigh in favour of the development?
Well, I'm struggling to put it into any other words, I'll be honest.
Then might I suggest you need to reconsider your motion if you can't give me reasons for refusal.
Does anybody else want to put it into better words than me?
There's loss of amenity. I mean, we haven't got to the highways and 200 at a time, because obviously I've said I'm against it anyway. But there's a loss of amenity, a loss of access to good quality of life. Or is that one that you have to reconsider, quality of life?
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Not at all, but if you went through the presentation, I tried to break down the components of what is the impact on amenity, and that's whether it's noise, whether it's daylighting, whether it's overshadowing, whether it's privacy. All of these are material planning considerations, but I think what we're asking is more conciseness in terms of which specific component of amenity is being impacted here, because then we could be able to apply it to various tests and policy.
I think the loss of these people's quality of life is enough, isn't it? I mean, really, it's not. So what is then,
We need
Stacey?
specifics, as Dave's just pointed out to you. What is it about the impact on their quality of life concerns you? What exactly? We need to put it into words.
Noise. Sorry. Traffic implications. Because at this point in time, there isn't any. And it will obviously go up massively. The loss of privacy. I don't know whether that is or isn't one, but it's something that I think everybody should have an element of. Is that enough or no? No.
Can you put your speaker on, Chris? Microphone, Chris.
Your microphone.
Yeah, quite simply, as it says in the human rights implications, which we must consider on this committee, it is their rights to enjoy their property. The development would interfere, there's no argument about it, would interfere with their rights to enjoy their property.
So that's completely acceptable. What I would suggest is, I'm hearing from Councillor Cox that it's noise, but specifically from the operations, but also from traffic. And that's something that, as officers, you can then apply to a planning policy. I think, you know, human rights is considered in the round on this application. This is why we're talking about it right now. But it's quite a generic reason for refusal. I think we need to be more specific about the components of amenity. Sorry.
I disagree with you 100%. You know, it is a responsibility put on this committee, not just to look at the bread and butter of, you know, the facts. We've got to look at the human element. I mean, planning, the only thing planning does not consider is people. It's our job to consider people, I believe. So if you're saying, well, human rights isn't enough, that people have a right to enjoy their property, I think that's pretty poor.
Just let Emma cut in here.
Sorry.
I'm sure Dave will expand on what I'm about to say. Councillor Kidger, I think planning absolutely is doing what it can to ensure that we are creating places for people. That's fundamental to what we're doing day in, day out, and why we're here and having this discussion. What I would do is suggest you have a look at what we've said at paragraph 7.38 of the pack, which is at page 129, which gives an outline of what policy 44 of the local plan says in respect of residential amenity. So developments must protect existing amenity and not significantly impact on the living conditions or privacy of neighbours or the host property, including their private gardens, be overbearing or result in an unacceptable loss of garden space. So policy 44 is seeking to protect amenity in the ways that you've described with reference to the Human Rights Act there. So I would say have a look at those paragraphs and that policy in formulating the ground of refusal, and that may well help.
Well, I'll take your word for that, and I think that proves my point then, because it's not doing that.
Anybody else got out to add? Rob?
Page 63 in the pack, we'll go from 7.156 on about very special circumstances. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the harm by reasonable inappropriateness or any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. It is well established that any other harm in the very special circumstances balanced is not limited to the greenbelt, but encompasses all other material planning harm relevant to the decision. The next one goes on to saying the scheme would introduce a material, localised change in character, most apparent for a small number of close-range receptors, those three properties. Effects are most pronounced in construction and early operational years. This attracts a moderative negative weight. The point after that as well says about day-to-day outlook and senses of the place will inevitably alter. On that basis, a noticeable enduring change to those properties is acknowledged and attracts a moderate negative weight. Does that provide suitable work?
It's within it's within your gift to apply whatever weight you see fit to that negative part of the assessment. So absolutely. What I would just add to that is, although the report's not brief, I've tried to make it as brief as possible. But perhaps if members could have a discussion around which particular property is impacted, because there's 3 properties on the site. There's varying degrees of harm, perhaps in your assessment. The closest, I'm not trying to prompt you, but the closest property and the one that's directly affected, based on your discussions, is Martin Grange Cottage, which is Mr. and Mrs. King's property. So I was just making that point, I was trying to keep it brief within the report, but perhaps members want to expand on any particular property within that assessment.
Can I say, I mean, we haven't and are not qualified in knowing all the ins and outs of it. I mean, there were a time, Dave, you know, when I'd have UDP and core strategy and all sorts. And in every policy, there's an argument within that policy. And we went to the local plan to have everything in one place. I mean, that's been smashed to bits, but we don't need to go into that one today. But within that, if I get the local plan out, and within each policy, there will be a for and an against within that. Do we need to go through every single item within the local plan to give you a reason why we don't like it and why we don't want it? Is that what we're saying? What we're asking for is, yes, we've had the report, we've had the responses, we've had 2 hours of, is it 2 hours? Nearly 2 hours of deliberation. And we're now still deliberating over trying to find the right legal thing. With legal guidance here, we're trying to find something that you want us to put into legal words. I'm really, really confused, because we're going to keep going and going and going until we're qualified to give you every single bit of information.
Emma?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cox, we're absolutely not trying to give you a planning exam here. What we're trying to do is just make sure we are crystallising your objections to the application in a way that would stand up at an appeal and that's robust in all respects and that reflects planning policy, as you've said. So what we're trying to do is tease out those concerns for you to make sure that that ground of refusal does stack up. So the things that we've heard so far are around the balancing exercise with the green belt, so the harm that's arising to the green belt and the fact that the committee doesn't consider that the benefits that have been set out to you today clearly outweigh the harms, and those harms specifically being around the impacts to residential amenity when you take into consideration policy 44. What we're trying to do is just also make sure we understand what you think those specific impacts are, and what we've heard is around noise specifically. The point Dave was making about think about which properties is that there are differences in terms of those impacts, and if we were to say in a ground of refusal that it was to affect a much larger area than it perhaps did, or perhaps you could evidence, then that reduces the ground of refusal in terms of how robust we can defend it. So that was really what we were trying to do in tease some more of that out. We certainly weren't trying to put you to task on all of the specifics, because that's what you've got us here for.
Thank you, Emma. there are only 2 properties within the vicinity. I mean, obviously, we need to name the properties. Do you want a postcode? What do you want? You know, when do bins get collected? Is that going to be a clash? You know, we've got all these things that is in the report, but you want us to give you a great spell of, please don't let anything happen to this particular address. And I'm sorry, I get it, but it just feels like we're going on and on.
Well, I'll say, I think it's the 2 properties that the objectors have put it down as, which is it the farm and the lodge or something like that? Cottage, sorry. Dave, is that the name of the 2 properties?
It's Martin Grange Cottage and Ravenglade are the southern, the 2 properties located together.
Yeah, so that's one. Yeah, come on, Stacey.
I just wanted to add also, I'm not trying to trip you up, Councillor Cox, or make your job hard for you, but as Emma was saying, we're here to assist you, but in order to do that, we need to understand what your concerns are. So that's why we're trying to get you to elaborate.
Thank you. I don't think anybody thinks that you're trying to strip them up. They know that you're doing your best. You always do. But so we've been asked. It's the 2 properties that have objected that we're actually talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to recap where we are then. So we've had a motion from Councillor Kidger to refuse. We've talked about the reasons why you don't consider very special circumstances are demonstrated. We've talked about loss of immediacy in particular, noise impacts. I've noted down traffic implications and loss of privacy as well. Are we still going with those? And in particular, the impacts on those 2 properties mentioned. So we just now need to go for somebody to second that motion if they're in agreement, and then we can have the vote.
Well, just before we do that, the other thing that we discussed as well is the effect on the green belt. That's another thing that we also wanted to make sure we're noted.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the very special circumstances test, yeah.
Sorry. Chris put his hand up to say that we should vote against this. Is anybody going to second that? Steve, can we have a show of hands then for rejecting this application? Can we have abstainers, please? And nobody against. So this application, which is spelling. Application 25/00028 FULM has been rejected. We'll have a toilet break. I think everybody's ready for one. Thank you. 5 minutes. Let's say 1:45.